Hi, my name is Janet Molbeck. I'm the executive director of Interweave. We're a small nonprofit here in New Jersey working to support spirituality for daily living, an integrated spirituality that nurtures wellness, the common good, and your spiritual life. Each year, we have a telethon. It's a way of keeping that work going. If you didn't have a chance to tune in, we hope you'll take advantage of this second opportunity. We want to thank you for supporting our work with 12 wonderful conversations about nurturing hope through prayer and practice, art and action. Thank you in advance for being there for Interweave and for the spiritual life in raising up the importance of hope. What we say here at Interweave is, let hope live in you. Thank you. Happy holiday. And welcome to the 11th hour of our fourth virtual annual Interweave hour. We have a very I want to welcome my friend and colleague, Scott Alexander. I'm going to say something about you, Scott, which is at this point in the day I need to read so that I make sure that
Keep it brief.
things correctly and honor who you are in the universe because we
Keep
love
it brief. Keep it brief. It's
Scott Alexander is the director of the Interschool, Interschool Doctor of Ministry program of it's an ecumenical program. Uh, that's exciting. And also the Catholic Muslim Studies at Catholic Theological Union. Did I get that right?
You got that right. The president will be happy.
Excellent. And Scott describes himself, I love this, as a scholar activist. I love that. His current research interests lie in the intersection of neuroscience and a subject we love, practical theology, especially in the areas of unconscious bias and what is increasingly referred to as us theming. And the title of our hour's conversation is Nurturing Hope Through the Practice of Compassionate Learning. And by the way, we had a lot of discourse just about what the title of our conversation was going to be. I love talking to Scott Alexander. And I'm, a little pooped out, Scott. So how
I can
invigorating
imagine. I can
that I get
imagine.
to talk to you at the end at the 11th hour. Um, and everything's a little counterintuitive here at Interweave. Friday the 13th, very lucky day here at Interweave. And the 11th hour, wonderful. 11th hour is wonderful, especially when I get to talk to you.
Oh, thank you. I
We had
feel
a
the
big
same way.
discussion about what this conversation would be. And I want to tell you that I'm happy to report to you that we have, our hope, Scott, was that we were going to be nurturing hope. And shockingly, as sometimes happen, you put an intention out into the universe, it actually comes back to you. I am feeling more hopeful as you come to me in this 11th hour than I did in the days before as we have been talking. And it has been because I've been talking to people like you who are trying to be in a learning mode, trying to be in a compassionate mode. And so we look to you, Scott. I'm just going to let you react a little bit to some of the things I've said, and we'll continue.
Well, thank you, Janet. Thanks for the introduction. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. I think it's my second year being part of this, and I know it sounds
Your
cliche.
third year.
Pardon? Oh, it's third. Okay. And I know it sounds cliche to say it's an honor, but it really is. What I'm about to say now, I wish I could say without you listening. And the only reason I say that is because given that you're listening, it might sound like vain flattery. And I don't intend it that way. I really intend this for other people to hear, especially other people who know you. I really feel the love and appreciate that you think I'm an embodiment of some of the values of interweave. But you're the one that gives so much of us hope. You're the one. You know, I, on some level, I have to be quite honest. I get paid to do what I do. Like it's my job. Sometimes I have to pinch myself about that, how blessed and fortunate I am to be able to kind of work in the spaces I work with people who come from all over the world, who want to make a positive difference in the world and whose faith commitments of various kinds. It's an ecumenical program. It's also an interreligious program, the Doctor of Ministry program that I have the privilege of facilitating. But you don't get paid.
I do. I have to get on the record. I do. A
Okay.
lot of people complain that I don't get a just wage.
Well, okay. So there we go. Same thing,
But
right? Same
but
thing. And and
still,
and
it is a
and
paid position.
and plus, I can tell, someone who does what they do because they couldn't do otherwise. Those are the kinds of people that I get the privilege of mentoring, the students in the program. But then I very generally look to you as a mentor, and you give me great hope by doing the things you do, by convening the kinds of people you do, and by doing it in the way you do, which really is an embodiment of compassion. And I've had that compassion touch my life, and I'm sure all those people who know Janet that are listening to my voice right now would say the same. So I just wanted to start with that.
So guess what, Scott? I'm so tired that I'm not going to fight with you about your
Good.
incredible generous
That's
statement.
very good to hear that. That's very good.
Thank you. I'm just going to say thank you.
You're welcome.
So I, I just want to give people a little bit of a backdrop that you and I have been, that we converse, we text sometimes. I Scott, one of the things that has been impressing me about this day, we talked about affordable housing, we talked about immigration, we talked about climate change, that with each, and we talked about taking care of ourselves in the middle of all of this. We talked about art. We talked about just now about the gift of elderhood, that somehow what is impressing upon me in this time that you and I have talked about has felt at times daunting and dark and difficult. That when people come together of goodwill, it is a kind of a medicine. I am feeling more hopeful with each story I hear. A story about people coming together in a world that doesn't want to have affordable housing to make that happen in a creative way with people with learning disability with serious disabilities in their life. Um I'm the one with the learning disability, by the way. Um
Me too.
um
ADHD.
right back at you. No wonder we have such long conversations,
There
Scott.
you go.
That explains everything. And we talked to Fletcher Harper earlier in the day from Green Faith, and that was not an easy conversation. But he has such an interesting disposition. He was just all about like it's the work. Let's get into the work, Janet. And I was, and also, and he wasn't um ho hum, and he did have those feelings of My God, he's done work that is at risk to be tremendous work. Thinking of the, Paris, tremendous work that could be at risk. And he's like, what can we do? Yes, I'm angry, but how can we protect? How can we go forward? How can we preserve? Really powerful conversation. So I'm sort of impressed with it's been impressed upon me by this day uh, that we still have levels of power, as another wonderful, wise guest shared, um, that we can use and that we can support each other in using those levers. And so I just want to let you comment about the what we're experiencing and how that's landing for you.
Well, thanks. First, I'll say something that's maybe someday you and I can have a conversation about community organizing and building power. The thing about power, I taught for many years a course with an African American Muslim colleague of mine on community organizing for racial justice. And because we do it from an interfaith perspective, and our students are mostly people of faith, one of the nuts we have to crack is that power is not a dirty word. That power is neutral, and that it's like electricity that can be used, or nuclear power can be used to power an MRI, if that's actually accurate, I don't know, or light up a city, so that people can find their way in the darkness, or can be used for weapons of mass destruction that can wreak all kinds of horror on the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So power is neutral. And we as people of faith need to understand that also power abhors a vacuum. And so if we're not building our power and exercising our power, to be sure, someone else will wield their power in the spaces in which we find ourselves and in which we feel called to work. So that's not, I wasn't prepared to talk about that, but just wanted to kind of drop that at the very beginning, and then say something about what I was kind of prepared, because you had said to me, if you can come up with a few ideas to unpack this notion of compassionate learning. And so I did my homework. I always do what Janet
You
tells me,
always
by
do
the way,
your homework.
everybody.
It's very
I
impressive.
always do what Janet tells me. I'm not sure about other
So
people,
impressed.
different. And I thought that, as I listened to you describe what's been going on today, I'm really gratified because it kind of resonates with how I thought I could package my reflections. And that is in terms of a term that's very common sort of in Catholic theological education, particularly graduate theological education, particularly at institutions that train people for ordination and for other kinds of ministry. And it's probably used, in a variety of other contexts, may have slightly different meanings, and that is formation. And I find that moments like this, like that you provide for us, or to come together in conversation, are formational moments. How we get formed for the vocations we're called to live into. To use a Christian term, how we get formed for ministry. And most of the discourse about formation talks about 4 dimensions of formation. There's human formation. There's spiritual formation, there's intellectual formation, and pastoral formation. And they're all, kind of, interwoven with each other. This is a holistic reality. And they're not, separate things that are disjointed. But human formation a lot centers around the question of who am I, and self-awareness. Understanding who you really are. Where do I come from? How do I think? How do I feel? Why do I feel the things I feel? What brings me great joy? What brings me great sadness? Getting to know yourself. That's the human formation part. The spiritual formation is all about connecting with one's higher power, right? To use the language of Alcoholics Anonymous, God, whatever is the word for that folk are most comfortable with. That relationship with that element we find deep within ourselves and deep within others, and that also impresses us as radically transcendent at the same time. That's the spiritual formation piece, and intellectual formation is sort of learning, right? Kind of coming to know the things we need to know in order to be effective agents of good and transformation for good in the world. And then pastoral formation kind of like nuts and bolts things about like what are some of the challenges we face when we do our work, and how do we learn techniques and best practices for meeting those challenges. So I had a few observations. I don't want to just make it a monologue. I had a few observations that
No,
connected.
I love
They're
this.
not divided like this so
No,
neatly.
but it turns out we've been doing this all day. I had
Right,
no idea.
right, right. Exactly. So that's what I mean. That's what I kind of delighted as I was sitting here listening to you describe what's
Delighted.
going on. And I know what goes on at these things from having participated before, that these are formational opportunities, blessed formational opportunities. So I don't have them all kind of lined up with the four different things. I think maybe
Sure.
the first one is more human formation. And you refer to the fact that, we're in a moment where many of us can feel discouraged, defeated, angry, frustrated, a range of emotions, many of which are negative, and many of which are understandable. I was tempted to say legitimate. I mean, there's no such thing as an illegitimate emotion or illegitimate feeling. Feelings are feelings, emotions are emotions, but certainly understandable given what's going on in the world, kind of what's always going on in the world. And two things in this regard that I thought at least are important to remind myself. I don't always do a good job reminding myself of these things, is that, cognitively, evolutionarily speaking, we have a number of different biases. They're cognitive biases that work at the subconscious level, without which we couldn't survive. I know when we hear the word bias, we think it's a negative thing and would like to get rid of all bias. But actually, if we got rid of all subconscious bias, right, we probably couldn't survive.
Mhm.
Because our brains and our bodies have evolved in ways that are very kind of refined and that are designed to be able to maximize our potential to flourish, survive and flourish. But there is a negative side of bias, right? And that is that some of these things that happen automatically at the subconscious level, maybe a certain percentage of the time, have a beneficial effect in terms of the survival and flourishing of the organism. But they don't only have a beneficial effect. And if they're not put in check, right? If we don't become aware of them, sometimes the negative aspects can begin to outweigh the positive aspects of our various biases, right? So Shankar Vedantam in a book called Hidden Brain has a line, where he's talking about our the unconscious dimension of how our brains and bodies work, and he talks about that as autopilot. And then the conscious thinking and self-awareness that happens in the prefrontal cortex is the pilot, right? And he says the pilot can always override the autopilot, but only if the pilot is paying attention. So if you're not aware of the fact that you have an autopilot, that the autopilot is almost always on, then you can't shut it off at important junctures. So what I wanted to just share briefly is about something called negativity bias. It's the reason why when you go to the supermarket, something will be sold as 95% fat-free instead of 5% fat. It's exactly the same thing. but if fat is the thing you're trying to avoid in your diet, let's just say, right, then negativity bias would turn you off to a product that had 5% fat, but turn you on to a product that was 95% fat-free. So, you know, how does this apply to the work that so many people who are connected with Interweave is all about? Well, that discouragement. Our brains tend to remember negative experiences on an order of about 10 times as much as positive experiences. And the reason negativity bias is there, as some folks might be able to infer and immediately intuit, is because, sure, you know, we have a wonderful experience, you know, walking through the forest with a friend. It was a great day. We had some great conversation. If you forget about that, if that can easily fade as a memory unless it's specifically recalled as the weeks go by, it's highly unlikely that's going to have a severe negative impact on you. But if walking in that forest, you happen to come across a bear's den and you realize that there are bears there and you narrowly escaped an encounter with a mama bear, right? And you don't remember that every time you go back to that forest on that pathway, right? You could die. So it's normal for us, right? To notice everything that's bad. And it's important for us to notice everything that's bad. For the same reason, it's important to remember where Mama Bear and her cubs are, you know, along that hiking path that you like to take. But if we become obsessed with Mama Bear on that hiking path and where Mama Bear is, we miss everything else about those walks. And we miss the reason why we're on those walks in the first place. So that's maybe the human formation piece.
So
Yeah,
now that you've done that piece, let me just comment a
sure.
moment. So, you know, in good learning, I want people to imprint what you so generously offered the wisdom you offered. Because one thing I'm hearing in that I love the pilot autopilot thing. And the reason I'm loving that and how I'm seeing that with this day, we're at a moment where we can't, autopilot could be dangerous. Our
Mhm.
pilot needs to be aware. And like you say, if you're, uh, um, I'll freely confess that I don't have any plans of getting a car that will drive itself. But if I did, I think I would need to stay aware, even if I was letting it let me rest a little bit so I could continue, so that I would, I don't give over fully my power. Um, but we're living in a time where we need to stay awake, and live in an awake way. And so that was a big, big takeaway.
As long as we don't beat ourselves up for sleeping, because sleep is also
We
important.
have to sleep.
Extend
So
your
yes,
metaphor.
so
Just
right,
because the autopilot's there for a reason. We cannot think our way consciously through all the various challenges we face in our daily lives. That's why we have an autopilot.
right. We need to
And
rest.
some things like a baseball hurtling at your head, watching a game that's a foul ball, right? If you had to rely on your conscious thinking to avoid getting hit, you'd get hit.
And that's where, if let's go away from that analogy and just say if we're well practiced, we just we just move away and that it's embedded
Well,
in
it's
us.
it's not about practice. It's about your brain, your subconscious brain picking up on the signals before you're consciously aware of what's
Right,
happening,
right.
and and giving commands and apportioning different things to different parts of your body so that you can react in a way that maximizes your well-being, your potential
Your
to
well-being.
stay safe, right? To stay safe. But the point you make about, I mean, you know, when it comes to things like us theming, for instance, we're wired to go into a kind of flight or fight response
Right.
when we meet someone from an out group that we perceive as hostile to our own in group, right? Um, Now, in some classic sense, I don't know, you're in some primeval forest, and the people from a different social group have been longtime adversaries of the people from your group, and you perceive someone from that group and you run out of there because you know that if those three people from that group encounter you as one, they might take you prisoner, etc. So that's great, right? But so oftentimes in our lives, when we encounter people from an out group, especially an out group that we think is hostile to our own in group, right? And who presents some kind of danger for us, our bodies are going to naturally go into the flight or fight response. It can be very subtle at first, but it's happening before you're even consciously aware of it. When the thing we actually need to be doing is stay as much as possible in the rest and digest response so that we can interact with those people, so that we can learn
Right.
from that person we're encountering. Because our survival probably depends more on our ability to do that than it does on our ability to escape
Right.
or to
Right.
fight,
Right.
right? Because in some ways, the running away and the fighting in so many of our complex social contexts that we find ourselves in, is actually counterproductive, and it actually harms us more, right? So that's where our biology, we can't just rely on the autopilot.
Right.
We want that autopilot on when the baseball's hurtling at our heads, or
Right.
when the tiger walks into the room. We want to be able to get ready to run before we're even consciously aware that the tiger has walked into the room. But we don't want that to
Right.
be in control when, I, as a self-identified kind of progressive, U.S. American, meets someone from the MAGA movement, for instance. It's counterproductive for me
Right.
to get my back up. It's going to happen a little bit, but to allow the autopilot to take over is not to my benefit, and it's probably not to the benefit of the other person either.
That's what we're going to need, that compassionate learning.
Right.
I want you to, because I could keep talking about just this one, and we only have,
I
this
know.
is the problem. This is why we have to have another telethon or have
I'll
you
tick through. I can tick through some of the others. I'll try to go a little more quickly.
so that because I wanna, you have so much that we want to respond to. Go ahead.
On the intellectual formation level, I was struck. I don't know how many people have seen the movie Conclave.
Oh, I
I read
love
the
it.
book when it first came out. I think what I'm about to share is not a spoiler, technically. I'm going to share something that happens in the movie, but it's not really something that
Not
spoils any
ruining the big
surprises.
ending. You're not ruining the big ending.
No,
He's
no, it
not.
has nothing to do with the end. Nothing to do with the ending, right? The main character, played by Ray Fiennes, in the book, his name is Cardinal Lomeli. He's Italian, but in the movie, he's Cardinal Lawrence. I think he's British. I think, right? And he's the dean of the College of Cardinals, and so he's in charge of the conclave to elect a new pope. And as the dean of the College of Cardinals, when the cardinals are finally sequestered in the Sistine Chapel and are about to, go through all the various processes for the first ballot, second ballot, third ballot to try to elect a new pope, he is charged. They have a mass, and he gives the homily. He celebrates the mass. He's the presider, the principal celebrant, and gives a homily. And here's what he says. And this is almost in the movie. It's almost directly from the text of the book from which I'm going to read. My brothers and sisters, in the course of a long life in the service of our mother, the church, let me tell you that the one sin I have come to fear more than any other is certainty. Certainty is the great enemy of unity. Certainty is the deadly enemy of tolerance. Even Christ was not certain at the end. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, he cried out in his agony at the ninth hour on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?
Mhm.
Our faith is a living thing precisely because it walks hand in hand with doubt. If there was only certainty, and if there was no doubt, there would be no mystery, and therefore no need for faith. Let us pray that the Lord will grant us a Pope who doubts, and by his doubts continues to make the Catholic faith a living thing that may inspire the whole world.
Mhm.
So one would be tempted, when I first saw that, when I read it, but it was a while ago, when I saw the movie, and Ralph Fiennes is a great actor, Ralph Fiennes, and he's delivering it in this wonderful way. It's a great scene. I'm thinking of other people's obsession with certainty, but not my own. Right? So certainty becomes the idol for other people, but not for me. And I think an important part of intellectual formation for this work is understanding that our problem is not other people's commitment to various kinds of certainty. It's our own. Can we, call into question, learn to question our own certainties, which is different from questioning fundamental values. I want to make that clear. When our values are make us who we are, they give our lives meaning and purpose. So if we value compassion, right? If we value justice, by all means, don't compromise your commitment to those values. But certainty has to do with what we learn about the world, how we see the world, right? Who we think other people are, for instance, what we think other people's motives are. Are we certain? Are we certain about those things? If we are, it's dangerous. Our certainty becomes dangerous. It becomes dangerous to our capacity to be in meaningful relationships, right? And to model for other people the very kind of reality like we hope to see in the world, to sort of, paraphrase Gandhi. So that maybe is the intellectual formation piece. I'll go to the pastoral formation piece, maybe. I mean, just beware in our openness, in our questioning of our own certainty, that we don't become complacent and accept what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once referred to as obnoxious peace. The kind of peace that stinks in the nostrils of God. These are words that he actually used in a sermon that he gave. This sermon was actually about, he was talking about, he gave it in March of 1956 at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. He talked about when peace becomes obnoxious. And he was talking about the incident of Autherine Lucy, who was the first African-American admitted to the University of Alabama in its 136-year history. And how, when she arrived on campus, a group of students came and crosses were burned and eggs and bricks were thrown. Just a horrifically ugly scene. And the next day, so then the university administration got together and they asked Autherine to leave for her own safety. So she leaves, right? So she's no longer the presence that disturbs. She's no longer a problem. And the headline in the Tuscaloosa paper the next day reads, "Today, Tuscaloosa is peaceful." There is peace on the campus of the University of Alabama.
Wow.
And Dr. King says this is a peace that has been purchased at the price of capitulating to the forces of darkness. And so, oftentimes I think when we're talking about compassion, when we're talking about mutual understanding, when we're talking about being open, we're talking about being tolerant, there can be that that implication that we're supposed to compromise on our values, that those things go together somehow, but no. And I would say no, that it's possible to embody this disposition of openness in a very genuine way, to question our own certainties, but to also be clear, about, what is the peace we're all working for and what it is not, right? And then finally, and maybe this is the spiritual dimension, let us be people of the long view, to put it in Christian terms, people of the eschaton. From a Christian perspective, it's often said that all good theology is eschatological. And, eschaton is a Greek word meaning the end, right? A lot of people who are activists, right, who are dedicated to making the world a better place, want to see results. And we should, right? We should want to see results. The desire to get results is what motivates us. If we're without that desire, it's hard to see how we could do the work that we do. But expectation to see results, perhaps exactly in the way we anticipate them, and being disappointed when the results don't exactly match with what we anticipate, can be dangerous. And there's perhaps no better expression of this kind of eschatological way of being, where we have to understand that as hard as we may work, we may never see the results we're looking for, at least in the time frame we would like to see it, is something called the Romero Prayer. Many folks might be familiar with it, but it was written by Bishop Ken Utner, a wonderful man who died at the young age of 66 from leukemia. He was Bishop of Saginaw, Michigan. And he wrote this prayer reflecting on the life of Bishop Saint Oscar Romero. It helps now and then to step back and take the long view. The reign of God is not only beyond our efforts, it's beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is another way of saying that the reign always lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes God's mission. No set of goals and objectives includes everything. This is what we're about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water the seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is in this a sense of liberation. This enables us to do something and to do it well. It may be incomplete, but it's a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for God's grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs, prophets of a future not our own. Amen.
Amen. This is one of my favorite prayers. Thank you. I so
So
well.
sorry for repeating something. You have maybe
I
some
could
of the
hear,
listeners haven't heard it before. So
no, I could have heard it a million times. Thank you. Thank you for bringing it into this day. It blesses this day. It blesses the work we've been doing today. It is work. Um, but I love the long view. I love the prophetic view, which understands that we may or may not see. I say we may or may not see because sometimes we see a little bit,
Mhm.
little glimpse of
Well,
the
we get
promise.
it right here, Jenna.
We've got it right here, right? The kingdom of
This
God.
is the glimpse right
This is
there.
the glimpse. You got
You know,
the lights even in
when
the
I've got
bedroom.
all my demon students together from different countries around the world, from different faith traditions, from different ethnicities, we're all in the same
That's it.
classroom trying to understand how God wants us to work in the world for. But it's like you see the miracle
Right.
right here.
And when that happens, I'm gonna go back to the bear.
Yep.
There's no bear. We're
Right.
here. We're safe. We're here. We're
Right.
in the
Right.
promise. I That's so important that we because that's how we're going to not let hope be stolen, joy be stolen, peace be stolen. And yet, we got to know when the bear is there and when the bear is not there. And Because
It
that's
also speaks to the
how we
difference between,
continue the work.
once a wise spiritual director of mine taught me, not early enough in my life, but better late than never, the difference between optimism and hope.
Say it
You know,
again.
the difference between optimism and hope, they're not the same thing.
Right.
Hope is a virtue, and hope is, I would offer it for people of faith, obligatory. It's non-negotiable. If we believe about the world what we believe, the essential goodness of human beings, that there's a loving and compassionate God, etc., well, we must hope. It doesn't make any sense not to, and we must commit ourselves to that. Optimism is an entirely different thing. If you're tied to the train tracks by double knots and the train is barreling down toward you, it's going to get to you in about 30 seconds, and you're planning, next month's vacation, uh, instead of maybe getting ready to quote unquote meet your maker, I think your optimism is a little misplaced. There's
Right.
no real reason to be optimistic. There's always reasons to hope for what will come next,
I,
what might lie beyond. But optimism, I think, is not the order of the day. And if you are optimistic, I think people would rightly conclude, to put it colloquially, you ought to have your head examined. So, as I look at the few coming years, ahead of us in this country, and some of the challenges that are before us, and some of the challenges that a new group of leadership will present, I don't tend to be optimistic. I don't have to apologize for that. But I would have to apologize to you and to other people here if I were to lose hope
right.
or allow myself to lose hope. Because the very fact that I'm invited here to have this conversation with you is just one reason why I should never lose hope.
And we're so hopeful that you came. I want to just, you said no, don't confuse hope with
Optimism,
optimism.
right?
And but here's the thing, and that was so interesting what you said about certainty and learning, and that you had no problem with uncertainty. A lot of people have a problem with uncertainty. Sometimes, uh, um, I think there's like it's deeper than a nostalgic longing for certainty. It's deeper than
Yeah,
it's
but the one pushback I'd give you is, it's not a lot of people. It's all of us have a problem with uncertainty.
there you go.
That's why I wanted to focus on my uncertainty and not your uncertainty or
Right.
that person's uncertainty or that person's uncertainty, right? Um, Mark Lila has a book called The Bliss of Ignorance. I think it's called The Bliss of Ignorance. It's an interesting book because it's all about our will not to know. I mean, Nietzsche pioneered this idea of the will to ignorance. And he has a line in the book where he says, it's something like, knowing is an emotional experience. It's a When I read that line in Lila's book, I just had to like stop and read it a couple of more times. Because
Right.
when we think of learning and knowing things, right, we often don't realize how deeply implicated our feelings are in that.
Right.
And we're essentially feeling beings. We're not essentially thinking beings, right? We do some thinking. Usually our thinking follows our feelings. But knowing is an emotional experience. And so sometimes as human beings, we don't want to know certain things because to learn those things, right, is very frightening.
Well, we started out earlier in the day. Well, not we didn't start out at midday. We talked about Socrates. We
Right.
talked about the cave.
Hey,
We talked
right.
about Socrates' key to wisdom was the not knowing. I don't know.
Well, except Socrates lionized the examined life. And for those of you that have recently maybe seen the movie Wicked or that know the Broadway musical, Fiero's song is all about living the unexamined life. And the and let's face it, that appeals to people, not just those people over there
Right.
who aren't being reflective, who aren't being thoughtful, or who aren't, learning enough and reading enough books. It's all of us. It's normal not to want to know everything about the way everything really is. And
Right.
so I think that can become the basis of compassion. I know it sounds odd.
No, it
People who are
right.
willing to believe lies because the
There's a
lies
little
are in
piece of
some way
me in
more
that.
comforting. The
They're
lies,
not some outside of me. I'm some way, in some way, that's a part of me. There's
right,
some part of me that doesn't want to know what I
right.
don't know. And
Which is why we often in our relationships, we often don't ask the question, do you love me? I mean, to make another musical reference in Fiddler on the Roof, that's a whole song. But but I think we're afraid of what the answer might be,
Mhm.
especially if we feel like we have to ask the question, especially of a person with whom we have an intimate relationship or a long-standing relationship. So coming to terms with the idea that as human beings, we have a hunger for truth. We do want to know things and we want to know how things are. And knowing how things are is important for a variety of reasons, even important for our survival. But two things can be true. At the same time, we don't want to know
Exactly,
all.
because what I'm trying to ask you is that uh, we think we're hoping for certainty. That's what I'm trying to circle back
Yeah,
to.
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
You see what
yeah.
I'm saying? It's like because wisdom, true wisdom and formation and all of the the diamond that you presented to us um is about, oh no, I'm going up, I'm not going down.
No, I get that. I know that. Yeah,
I
yeah.
know. Is somehow able to transcend that need for hope doesn't uh, reside or can't reside, will not find a permanent home, a safe haven, if certainty is what we think is the price or
Right,
or the ticket
right,
to hope. Hope
right.
is something else.
Also, I mean, what when the Lamelli character, the Lawrence character says, "There's without doubt, there's no mystery." He's not just romanticizing the idea of mystery for mystery's sake. I think what he's saying is, in the mystery lies our becoming.
Right.
In the mystery lie possibilities that we don't fully imagine. And so if you're so certain about how everything is, how do these possibilities ever realize themselves? They won't.
It's the
So
good.
embracing
But
mystery
is
is
this good news
scary,
or is this bad news? And if we're going to live in an axial age and be, and it's going to be rough, can we still be excited about what might emerge from all of this? Can we
right?
still,
And understand not knowing, our fears of knowing, our uncertainty, all these things that when I say these words, not knowing, fears of knowing, uncertainty, have negative valences, that they're also actually very positive things.
So I'm going to ask you the question before you go that I've asked every person, and I am a little hoping that two friends of yours are going to arrive after you go. I know you can't stay, but we'll report back and share back that conversation. Osmond and John Paul are coming
Right.
to talk about the life of Mr. Gulan and why that matters, and why is the title
Can
so?
I say something about this?
Yes, say something.
So for me, Fethullah Gulen, the reason why his legacy, and for those who may not know, we recently lost him. He's gone home to God in late October. And it's a loss for all of us who know him. Um, at the same time, he has left behind this incredible legacy, not just of writings and reflections that are just very deep and very rich, but of communities of people who have dedicated themselves to making the world a better place. But the reason I think this legacy is so lasting is because it's all rooted in love.
Mm.
And you might ask, well, what's the connection between love and uncertainty, right? Love actually works in uncertainty because Mr. Gulen was the kind of person that was willing to put his faith in people without having any evidence or any proof that they were worthy of that faith. And I think that was one of the great sort of virtues that he embodied and that he taught other people. That to love, you have to sort of be self-emptying. You have to be vulnerable. You can't love without the willingness to be vulnerable, without the possibility that you're going to make a mistake, that maybe you put your faith in someone and they disappoint you. But at a very basic level, he knew that. And he showed people what it's like to believe in one another, in the same way we aspire to believe in God. And I think that's one of the reasons why his legacy is so rich and will be, inshallah, God willing, so lasting. And I think you have no better people to talk about that
We have
than Professor John
now,
Paul and
and
Osman Osterbrück, for instance. So,
but I wanted to give you an opportunity to comment, because I know you have a great everything you spoke about, um, the way of being, and points to that life. So I wanted to give you that opportunity. But before you go, so thank you for that. What is what is something that is giving you hope? Well, in a word or a sentence, because they're gonna throw the producer's gonna throw me off.
uh,
Something
I'll
that's
just say
giving
my
you hope.
students.
Mhm.
I'll just say my students. They give me, enormous hope. If you could just spend 5 minutes with the group that I was in this last semester, you'd see why. One thing I want to say before I leave, though, I'm an invited guest to speak, right? I used the QR code. I went on and I donated. Every other speaker that's been invited, if you haven't donated yet, donate, because that's all a part of committing to this work and supporting Janet and all the other people who make Interweave happen.
Thank you so much for advocating and
Okay.
supporting Interweave, with your words, with your heart, and with your philanthropic gift.
Well, I'm
Good
not
thing.
Mark Cuban, but do my part.
Good- I'll take you any day.
Thank you. Okay. Good night.
Good
Yeah.
night. Good night.